I like that he looked over at me with the intro I gave him to confirm facts. That was nice. He was like, right? Yeah. Let's hear it for the last comedian, guys. Let's hear it for the whole show. This has been great. My favorite part of that last comedian set was a Middle Eastern Jew who was mad at hipsters because they can grow facial hair. I feel like if he wanted that mustache, all he had to do was dream and it would just pop onto his face. That's what they're designed to do, right? If I've learned one thing. All right. Guys, I feel a little weird today. I lost my Dungeons & Dragons virginity today. I played that shit for the first time. I had avoided it like the plague my whole life, and it was peer pressured by some friends. Did I think 28 years old, and I would be being peer pressured by my peer group into playing imaginary swords. Has anybody in this room played that shit before? Okay, good. So there are not that many. Let me explain the rest to you, because it's insane that this is a thing that is caught on. You get a bunch of people together who have 5 hours free. And then you get that amount of time's worth of Mountain Dew, and then a guy with a plaque in front of him tells you some stuff, and then you're just like, well, can I do this? And he rolls some dice and goes, yes. And you're like, how about this? And he rolls some dice and goes, no. And it's at that point that I'm like, this is basically just religion. There's just a man behind rolling some dice and going like, well, according to this thing that you can't look at, here's some rules. It's a beautiful thing. I tread the line for the nerd world. Like, you can't work for a company called Nerdist and I'd still live in denial. To a certain point, you just have to accept, like, yeah, that is a Batman action figure I look at as I go to bed at night. Yep. I have said out loud, I can't kill myself. The next Avengers movie is coming. At a certain point, you just realize you gotta toe the company line, guys. But I realized it wasn't always that way, and I'm now obsessed with figuring out where shit went awry. Because recently I was looking through my senior year high school yearbook, and there's not one, there's not two, there's 3 separate girls who in their signature allude to a time I tried to get them into a threesome. And my first thought was confusion, because I thought, I feel like I'd remember that. And the second thought was, when did I used to be awesome? Who is this person I've blocked out? Who's just like, hey, you, me, and her, huh? To the point where they were good-natured enough about it to think it was funny, like, ah, you almost got me. Like, now I feel weird if, like, my girlfriend comes in and I'm watching a scene with boobs from Game of Thrones. Like, no, they mean nothing to me, it's a show. God. I did music for, like, years before getting into comedy. I feel like comedy was the way where I was like, you know what, let's burn that whole lifestyle before and just start fresh. And, like, I love comedy, but, like, comedy's fun mostly because you don't have to bring shit to the gig. Like, I brought a bag earlier, and I just put that in the car because it was too much work. I used to have 2 full guitar amp stacks that weighed like 100 pounds each behind me so that I could just be the loudest human being in a building. And then one day I was like, you know, I could sell this van and then just be a person. But I feel like the reason that I had to quit music was because I peaked. Does anybody else in here peaked? It's fun. Guys, rhetorical questions are the best. Because you learn an awful lot about the people who still feel inclined to respond. Like, they're much less me trying to, like, reach out to you guys, as much as me just doing a long-form psychological test on rooms of people. But I peaked when I did music, and it was my brother, who I was also in the band with, called me one day and he was like, hey dude, you gotta email this guy back. He messaged us about he wants to put a bunch of our songs in a movie. And I was like, that's awesome. And so I called the guy, and he's like, yeah, we're doing this movie, we're using all punk bands on the soundtrack, and I love these 3 songs off your record, I would love to use them. It's an independent film. And I was like, that sounds great, awesome. He's like, now, I'm gonna be honest with you at this point, it is an adult film. Now what I like is that the road from independent film to porn film was 2 sentences. That went from, like, legitimacy to are you still down, just out the gate. And he was like, is that going to be a problem? And I was like, for sure it's not. And so I gave him things, we signed some contracts, and then I get invited out to the premiere of a porn, which was at the Airliner, which is a venue out in the bad part of Los Angeles, not a red carpet, but there was a lot of people in sweatpants. And at some point my friend realized that the girl who sells him drugs at his dispensary is also in the movie. And so instead it's at a bar and they're just putting on the porn on the screens that they normally play football games on. And now you're in a dark room full of a bunch of strangers all watching porn together. And the scenes came up, then my music played, and then it was fun, and then I was given a copy of the DVD. And that's a real intense moment in your life. Because you come to a crossroads, it's sort of an event horizon. Because guys, once you have like masturbated to porn where your voice is audible in it, you transcend into a level of narcissism you can't come back from. Because I mean, at the end of the day, all porn is just people watching and going, I'd like to do that. But now you're listening to it and going, oh, I'm kind of there. I'm like a weird God force surrounding them. I'm the Force from Star Wars. For like a dude with a weird skull tattoo and his friend Dave and their friend Martin, who are all fucking a girl named Carol. And like at one point we had like a weird psychedelic breakdown and they played with the editing. I'm like, oh man, somebody like really put effort into this. And then the day I realized really that comedy was what was meant for me and not doing music for porn was I was hanging out with a girl and we traded something. I had started doing stand-up and she had a book that was all short stories of dudes having sex with horses. And it was, you went, what? That was a full-on reaction. That's like the best case scenario for that sentence. Like everybody else sort of being really upset that that's a thing our First Amendments allow is fine because you went, what? But, so we traded, and then I never got my DVD back, but I still have that book because it's the first thing I ever wrote a stand-up bit about. And I just feel like it's this weird symbolic thing. And so it just makes me real happy. I just like letting people know. It's called The Stallion Rides, and you for sure can buy it on Amazon. My porn is not available on Amazon, which is a real sign of legitimacy in this world. Guys, I was walking through Target the other day, and I was buying charcoal briquettes. Do you see how intense that segue was? I'm like, and I don't have an ending for this, let's bail out. And so I'm at Target, and I buy charcoal briquettes, which if you're going to do a bit, say a word that's really difficult to say a bunch of times over and over again. But it has warnings all over it about how they release carbon monoxide. And I'm like, that's really intense. How many people have killed themselves with quick lighting charcoal briquettes that this is now like a thing that's not just one warning, but there's like 5. And that got me to thinking, and that took me down a real dark road. And guys, I think I figured out the optimum way that I'm going to kill myself. Come to the journey for me. We've got the bag. We're walking through Target. Might as well buy a couple more things. I'm gonna buy a deli plate, crouton plate, some Tito's pizza rolls. Then we're gonna keep on walking. And then I'm gonna buy a giant sombrero. Now we're gonna go back with me to my apartment. I'm gonna set up the deli tray, I'm gonna set up the pizza rolls, I'm gonna set up the things, I'm gonna set up my hibachi grill in my living room, I'm gonna light the grills, I'm gonna put my giant sombrero on, I'm gonna sit on my couch and I'm going to asphyxiate to death. Because when the police kick open the door on my bloated, rotting dead corpse, it will look like I threw a barbecue and no one came. And then they'll be super bummed out. And it'll just be, oh. Like they're sad and grossed out. And then when they put things together, then they're really bummed. And I like the idea that they'll start stress eating the food I left out. And then I can just haunt them. Like a really petty ghost. Who's like, did they get the invites? Had a lot of like random jobs. I graduated college in 2009. When I went into college, everyone was like, you gotta go to college if you want to get a job. And by the time I got out of college, I was like, why did you go to college? What? Oh, English? great, bet you wrote a lot of poems. Fuck you, there are no jobs. Get out of our sunglasses hut, I'm not even gonna read this application. And I ended up getting a job at a private school that I got the job off of a listing on Craigslist. Now, well, that sounds real sketchy. I've also learned that it's only kind of legal. But what was great is a private school, it turns out there are two kinds of private schools in this world. There are good private schools, and there are the kind of private schools that are set up for adults who are like villains from 80s movies who have become adults and have kids, and they send their kids there to avoid Latinos. And that is the kind of school I ended up working at. And I got to do a lot of cool stuff there, but also it really put life in perspective sometimes. And this is a story that, to me, really sums up working there. I'm walking around one day, and at a certain point, they just put me in charge of kindergartners, because when you're 6'6", you are just the most exciting thing to someone who's this tall and has all the energy in the world. Because they'll try to grab your legs, and then you shake them off, and they go flying, and that's a game. They fly, they're fine. Just back on, you're just like, it's a little dance you do. And so I'm watching the kindergartners, and then I have this girl stroll up next to me, and she's just looking up. I'm like, what up? And she's like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, good, how are you? She's like, well, about that. I was walking, and then you know how you're walking, and then you pee? And then you're just somebody who's walking who's peeing. And I was like, what? She's like, well, that's me. I did that. And I was like, that's a bummer. For sure it is. I mean, you're an adult, so I feel like you have a plan for this. I'm like, I for sure don't. But I like that you're being real cool about it. It's like, well, I mean, there's nothing, I mean, the damage is done. And so I have a group of kindergartners I have to watch, but I don't want to leave this girl just, you know, covered in pee. And so we're standing there, and finally I'm like, you know what, I'm going to call the front office because I can't leave these kids alone. So I pull out my phone, I get the front office on the horn, and they're like, I was like, hey, I've got a girl who peed, what's the protocol here? I'm new. And this phone is real far away, I'm gonna make it here. Just commit to the act out. And she's like, well, how bad's the damage? Like, did she pee a lot? Like, well, how bad is that? I turned to her and go, so how bad's the damage? She's like, I don't know. And check. You 1 for me. You 5. And I turned and I go, she's 5. I don't know. I don't know what I'm legally allowed, the kind of conversation I can have with a 5-year-old girl about pee. I'm already real upset. So I'll tell you what, I'll cut out the middleman, hand her the phone. I hand her the phone, and then it occurs to me, that girl's hands are covered in pee. Now they're just on my phone. She looks at me with the phone up to her little ear. She turns away. I'm like, that's kind of a dick move. We were on the same team. Why are you doing me like that? They talk and they have a little powwow, and she turns back, she hands me my pee-covered phone. And I'm really legitimately holding it like this. And they're like, well, just send her up to the office and we'll take care of it from there. I'm like, I feel like we could have just done that and I wouldn't have to have a pee-covered phone. But thanks for being thorough, I guess. So I put my phone away after covering it in a bunch of like antibacterial wipes. And then I come at the end of the day, and that girl's gone, and I go to the office to check out, and I'm like, oh, hey, what happened? What was the deal with that? Is she cool? Is everything fine? And she's like, well, yeah, I mean, we have a pretty good situation with that. I'm like, well, what's the deal? What do you do with that? And she's like, oh, and she pulls out a box that looks like a tissue box, but it's way bigger. And what it is full of disposable little girl underwear. And they're like, yeah, we just throw the other ones away or put them in a bag, give them to her folks, and give her one of these. And now I have to live the rest of my life knowing that that's a thing that exists. And now, so do you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.